Thank you, David. I would like to begin with various thanks, both to David and to Francesca Fiorani for their kind introductions to the lectures, to Walter Jost, who's not here today because he's teaching, but as chair of the Barbour, the Page-Barbour committee, he's been unfailingly supportive. Everything has gone absolutely wonderfully. To Richard Jones, who's been the administrator and been making sure that everything happens on time and well. So thank you very much, and thank you to the others who have helped. It's been a great pleasure. My experience on the campus, which I visited twice before and indeed stayed with David on one occasion, now interacting with the staff here, the campus has an absolutely spectacularly good feel to it as a place of work. And, I've worked in nice places, but I don't envy you, but I recognise the kind of place you work in. It's a great pleasure to be here. I should also say, thank you for coming along. I should also say, I suggested in passing that if you want, as members of the audience, to contribute some thoughts to the book, I spoke to the editors and they're entirely sympathetic to this, not as the kind of questions and answers, but obviously I trespass on a whole range of territory, not all of which I understand as well as I do some of the central territory I branch out, I stride out from. But if somebody had a contribution, 500 words or even a quotation or something, it'd be nice to have an open forum in the book, and you can get hold of me perfectly easily via the university or martinjkemp.com. There's an email attached to that website. And this is an open invitation. I can't promise the publishers will take them, of course, but it would be nice when people whose interests I've touched on in particular areas, you could throw in something. As I said, it could be very short, it could be longer. This is not the normal kind of response that gets published in conferences. It's much more informal, and I hope a rather more creative thing than that. Today's lecture is somewhat different, or seems rather different from the previous two lectures. As David said, one looked at geometric solids as the result of process, but certainly static structures of great beauty in their own right and their echoes across various scales. The second one at processes, particularly splashing and folding, which morphologically are rather different. And this one tackles a rather different issue, or apparently different issue, that's to say the issue of naturalism and its role, particularly in scientific illustration, but coming out of an artistic area. To link them, what I would like to do is to issue a sort of brief preamble, which in some ways is half an answer to a question that Mark Whittle asked after the first lecture, and that is about the cognitive and perceptual aspects of these underlying structures, the underlying structures in our brain and the underlying structures of nature and the feedback one between the other. And I'll use an example famous enough, obviously close to my heart to deal with this. And it's a question of what are the mechanisms involved in seeing a picture which evokes what Ernst Gombrich, one of my mentors that I did a study with him, called the eyewitness principle, the sense that you are there and are an eyewitness to an event of some sort, without taking that to too naive a level, but you can get a sense of what is meant. My framework for this is broadly Gombrichian, in that it takes his idea of making a matching of schema, the starting point for a representation which will bear some resemblance to you're representing the schema and correction, which relates to Popper's scientific method of hypothesis formation and not verification in that case, but falsification. And the two men were friends, and Gombrich's method is very much linked into that Popperian method. What I'm more concerned with, Ernst Gombrich on the whole looked at the naturalistic image as a naturalistic image. My way of doing making and matching is thinking about perceptual triggers, which are very selective, very functional, and occur in particular contexts in particular ways. So in a painting like this, I'm less concerned to think, is this how we see space, but that the artist is using in that coffered ceiling very powerful perceptual triggers playing towards gravitational forces through which we make particular spatial sense of things. And in the Leonardo's Last Supper, the structure is very difficult to make logical sense of. But the conviction of the coffered ceiling is such, and our tendency to gravitate towards those clear signs of spatial organisation means that we don't ask the difficult questions unless we're deeping art historians about what's the actual structure involved there. We rather take it as given. The same applies to all the other naturalistic tricks in this: colour, perspective, texture gradients, all the other visual clues, the sort of things which Gombrich, Gibson and the perceptual psychologists who were around when I was first entering the subject were much concerned with it. And then there's the other level of triggers which are very deeply ingrained in the human mind, as we know from neuroscience, and the recognition of faces. So much effort devoted to that in the human brain, in the neurological system. The recognition of Christ here, the recognition of others as individuals, if not saying definitely that's St. Peter or whatever, and the recognition of expression, which occurs in a different part of the brain, again with an enormous amount of equipment devoted to it. So in terms of the dynamic aspects, the expressive aspects, the recognition aspects, and the visual texture, I'm taking it that what artists have learned to do over the years is to pick out particular sensitivities or to pull particular triggers in a very selective way. So this is not what the world looks like, but it is playing a terrifically powerful game with the mechanisms that we have been equipped with, both by nature and nurture, and that's the question, and I'll unpack that rather further in the published version of the lectures. And so, in a sense, what I mean by the real is not a kind of naive version of the real, but it's in terms of these tricks, these devices which artists have perfected to make us suspend our disbelief to some extent at least, while still aware, of course, that this is a picture. The lecture is taking us on trust as such. Let me just give you a bit of background. I gave you some backgrounds in the other two lectures. It takes off from a piece I published a long time ago in 1990 in Archives of Natural History, called indeed Taking It on Trust. And a lot has happened in the meantime, both in terms of things I know about and in terms of things other people have contributed. In terms of the more modern imaging, which I've begun to write about, that's to say on the internet and the computerized imagery, there's a piece called In and Out of Time, Is There Anything New Under the Cyber Sun, which is an imaging in the 21st century edited by Oliver Grau and Thomas Vagel. And there's a piece coming out in New Representations in Scientific Practice by Mike Lynch and Steve Woolgar. So I am actually actively working at that most modern, most up-to-date ends of computer imagery, though that features less in this piece than it might otherwise do.